Okay, welcome to a Wednesday afternoon live stream. Today we're going to be talking about Logic Pro rumors, update schedule. I'm curious for a lot of participation from you to tell me what things you're interested in seeing in the next Logic update. I'll be repeating that question as more people join, but um, the specific question that was on my mind, posed by a friend, was what would you be willing to pay for in a Logic update? Say for the first time in many years that Apple said this is going to be a paid update. I don't think that's the case for what's coming next, but if it was, say that they were going to charge us for an update, what features would you deem valuable enough to make it a paid update? So that's the question we're going to be talking about for a little bit here. Um, I used uh, I used some web search AI to collate the most common requests of what Logic users want from Logic. So it's scoured the web. It looked at everybody's comments, and we have a list of, let's see, one, two, three, four, maybe five things. So 4 to 5 things that we're going to be talking about that came from that search. So this is a list of the things that people, when they go online and talk the most, that they are saying that they wish that they would add to Logic. For me, and I'll maybe start with these personal things as well, or maybe I'll sprinkle them throughout. But there are a few things that I wish that Logic would add. It's getting really close. I think as a workstation, in my opinion, it's getting really close to the point where it does everything that I would personally want it to in a workstation. And there's only a couple things right now that are missing. I've made this type of video since I started on YouTube every couple years. For a long time, there was a list of things that I wished Apple would fix about Logic Pro. There was when you would freeze a track, it wouldn't remove any of the samples from the memory, and so anytime you froze a bunch of virtual instruments, it would crash your system because it couldn't release them. When I was first using Logic, it was in the main window. You couldn't edit audio down to the sample level. You had to do it just at the MIDI level, so down to ticks, and so you couldn't actually do like accurate editing in the main window. For a long time, the balance knob instead of a true pan knob was something that was on my list. Over the years, there's always been something. None of them have ever stopped me from working in Logic or enjoying working in Logic, but certainly there have been things that over the years have caused a lot of issues. Um, I don't want to talk too much about ARA because that is something that is broken. Broken isn't the right word. Um, it's not an existing feature of the universal version of Logic Pro right now. Means it's not necessarily a bug. Or if it is, I mean, I think it's like a design choice for the moment. It's got to be at this point. So put in the comments the things that you would love to see added in Logic, and we'll talk about the feasibility of what those things look like. Because certainly over the years I've studied, I actually made a video like a couple years ago where I went through every single update since Logic 10 was released. Now we're in Logic 11. And there are lots of trends and things that Apple consistently does with this software. And I think we can learn about what's coming next by seeing what came before. Not always. I mean, every once in a while, Apple does something like invent a new phone and changes the world. But I don't think that they have all of their brightest innovators um, working on Logic Pro right now, right? I don't think that that's the case. I think that they have a really good team working on Logic Pro, but they're not saying like our number one priority as a company is to make Logic Pro, you know, the most innovative software platform on the planet. That's not in the realm of feasibility. Tickman says in the comments, I'd like a virtual player acoustic guitar. And that is definitely like in the top 5 things. And if I were asking that question, what is it that I would be willing to pay for in Logic as an update? That'd be one of them for sure. That's like my bar. So let me go through this list of what the everybody on the internet is saying. I'm curious to see which of you agree or disagree. Put it down in the comments. One of the number one user requested features or improvements in Logic is an analog style summing mixer, which would emulate console summing and has been missing piece of Logic Pro toolkit compared to other workstations. How many of you feel like that is one of the number one things that you wish would be added to Logic? I'd love to know in the comments if that's actually something that you're all looking for. Samuel says, surely they're going to try and combat the AI generators, maybe a text box to request. And then Tickman says, yes, Aniv, let's look at this for a second at the feasibility of the team at Logic, the developers with Logic actually doing that. Do they care about analog technology? And I would say definitely. Let's look at what we have in here. They love vintage gear over at Logic. For instance, just looking at the vintage EQ collection with the vintage console EQ, which is a Neve emulator, not in name, but certainly in sound. And then we have the API. Yes, that's an amazing equalizer here in our toolkit. And then we have the Pultec. All 3 of those built off of really classic pieces of equipment, right? But that's just the beginning in some ways. If we look at, for instance, what they did even in the most basic compressor that comes with Logic, where they are clearly saying, you know what, let's add an LA2A type thing. Let's do the 1176. Let's do Focusrite Red. It just goes on and on. All of these are mimicking those classic pieces of analog gear. They clearly have put time and thought into this. And then on top of that, we have one of the newest pieces of that, which would lead directly into having some sort of analog summing in our mixer if they just integrated differently, and that would be ChromaGlow, which again is built off of analog hardware. They don't say it. They say like what type: retro tube, modern tube, magnetic with tape, squeeze, analog preamp. They say that. They don't say exactly which kind, partially because Apple's a little cheap on like actually licensing out the names of things. But this has all of that, and this is an advanced tool. This is not just like, let's put some dynamics and equalization control on your track. No, this is digging way deeper in how it does that. This is a really amazing sounding tool. Okay, that's just getting started though, because we also recently got one of the greatest vintage reverbs ever made, the QRS. They've shown over and over and over again that they're really into the vintage and the analog aesthetic. We have instruments. We have all of the classic, the B3, the Rhodes style emulation, all of that stuff. It just goes on and on and on. And so I think that this as an option, the analog summing mixer, we kind of, no one's really framed it this way before, but I think the mastering tool does this as well. To a certain degree. We don't have anything loaded in our project to actually use that with. But this actually, I believe, has a little bit of that analog mixing aesthetic, or could easily add more of it, more clarity about how that does that with some of those algorithms that you can choose from, the punchy, the clean, all of those. I believe actually does a little bit of that as well. But at which point in the signal chain do you need it? Do you need it more integrated so that it's coming down the channel strips and then working out to the output? Can you just do it in a single plugin at the end like the mastering assistant? Yes and yes, both of those things could be working. Okay, so that was one of the top requested things, and I do hear people talk about that in other workstations. For me personally, that's not a deal breaker. I don't think I need that particular feature, but it would be awesome. It's like I do look at jealousy at some of the other workstations that have that more integrated in, and think, you know what? Why not? I mean, Apple's definitely bought into the vintage gear nostalgia factor, and I love working on like our SSL console on campus or our API, and like my first console as a, well, not my first, one of my early consoles as a student was a Neve console that used to be in Abbey Road that had been moved to Colorado. It used to be in, I think, Studio C at Abbey Road. And that thing was a beast. It had so much character. And I think in this world of pristine workstations where it's like they've made the audio quality so pristine, I think a little bit of character and noise is a good thing. Number 2 on this list was chord track and session instrument enhancements. So this was the kind of the number 2 feature that users across the internet are looking for. Further development of the chord track, more ways to interact with it, expansions to the session instruments to include more genre-specific styles and features. Yes, the chord track is such a great foundation, and I think what we're learning from the chord track is how it can be useful with the session players, but right now it's very limited. And at the glacial speed, sometimes that the team is working on Logic, I feel like maybe I just want this to happen before I retire. I'm young still, but before retirement, please, let's get some more styles for the drummer. We've been asking for that for years. um, so all of the tools have been in here. It's like if I play a chord on the keyboard, if you look at the top, it knows what chord I'm playing, right? So it can do full analysis of any MIDI that we have. Great. Maybe what they're doing is working on a way to get the audio chords as well, which technology is readily out there. I'm sure that they can already do this, but I would love to be able to like select a track, kind of like we do with the groove track with the star, and say, you know what, I want this to be the chord track source, and everything just gets pulled up into the chord track from whichever track is selected. They're not going to do it exactly like Studio One does it. Studio One has one of the better chord tracks out there, meaning you can like take a full track. I think you just drag it up to the chord track. It does an analysis and converts it into chords that then can be used for other things. Cool. But Apple has long wanted this functionality. It was clear somebody had a vision early on with Apple Loops, where Apple Loops would follow chord changes. I mean, it never worked like that, but it was clear that that was the direction they wanted to go in. And I mean, it kind of worked. They had some limited functionality, and then it like all disappeared. And then we have the new chord track with the session players. And it feels like somebody finally was like, here, we're going to change direction so we can get this original vision of what we had with the Apple Loops. The Apple Loops, by the way, they're super cool. But you can see, let me see with this. Let's do instrument. Actually, some of the new packs I think are really the best way to do this. So you can see over on the side that this little chord symbol here means that these have chord track information. And if we pull one of these out, then it has the chord information there, even on the audio files. They've been analyzed. And so these can actually be pulled up into the chord track. That's not a problem. So they have this functionality that's just on the verge of being able to really do amazing things. It just needs like another version. So I would love for the chord track to actually finally now live up to that potential that started all those years ago, and be able to control more than just the 3 session players, or at least I don't have to type in the chords manually. There's hope. We're hoping. Now, I don't know how many, for instance, how many of you are using Logic Pro for iPad. Maybe I can do a quick hand raise from everybody in the chat. Who's using the iPad version of Logic Pro? Let me know. The reason I'm asking is because if you read the user agreements or look at the App Store, it tells you which apps are sending use data back to Apple. And Logic Pro for Mac is not capable of doing that. It's not capable of actually sending that back. I don't think it was designed that way. And it says it doesn't. But the iPad version of Logic says it is sending usage data back to Apple for anyone who uses it. And that's, step one of Logic domination by Apple in terms of that new version, because they can see now how many people are using things. And part of that, I think, would be a reflection on how easy it is to use. The iPad version is in some ways easier to use, in some ways harder to use. But maybe a bunch of people are using it for the first time and they don't even know what it's capable of. But they're looking at that usage information, and I have to imagine that they're going to say like, ooh, the chord tracks and the session players are a huge part of the usage. That's where we're going to focus our time and energy of updating, because that's what people are interested in. They have people probably scouring all the internet for like I did with this video, trying to figure out what the most requested things are, because it would be stupid, although not completely un-Apple-like, it would be stupid to build a bunch of features that nobody cares about. Right? Wouldn't that be stupid? How many times has it happened, though? I think it's happened a few times. But along with the chord track expansion, I think we need more styles. I don't feel like we got any new styles in the last update for the drummer. Certainly, they can't imagine that the styles they've given us are the complete list, right? No. Put a break on that. There's no way that that's the complete list of styles. Do you think the team is really interested in giving us like jazz and funk and rockabilly, as Graham just asked for? I don't know. Funk? Quite possibly. There's a lot of modern pop styles that have funk influenced styles. Jazz? I mean, unpopular take here, but I mean, a few genres of music I believe should still be left to the musicians. But I get it. It's like I wouldn't mind having some good jazz options, because you can do a lot of like fusion styles between jazz and other styles and come up with some really cool results. And I'm not going to just hire a jazz drummer to come in and play in the studio for like a song I'm just demoing, right? It's not going to happen. So it would be nice in terms of Logic Pro as a songwriting or a production proof of concept to have those styles, even if we really hope that they're still going to be performed by like real musicians at some point. Jazz drums is very different than like a country drum track. I mean, there's not a lot of similarities. The actual session player would have to have more nuance and subtlety and interaction. But we could fake it with some just like what appears to be those things without actually having them. Although a lot of the stuff is in there. I mean, it's just it's tricky to get that stuff right with MIDI for sure. And then Graham or Midas says I would pay for ARA. And I mean, there's a number of people. That's why. So those of you just joining, I said we're not going to talk too much about ARA because we know, we know, everybody knows, we all are aware. But it's for what one reason or another. Maybe that's what 11.2.3 will be. It'll just be an ARA update, and then everyone will rejoice, and we can go back to complaining about the other normal things. Graham says chords generated in the stem splitter. Now that would be a cool place to add it as well. So we just do the stem split and also say pull the chords up to the chord track. That would be a good way to do it. But more styles for sure for those things. And that comes back in number 4 on this list. So we're going off a list of what the most requested features are across the internet, collated by our friends in the AI business. The third was a unified browser and plugin tiles. Is to bring, so the unified browser referring to the one that's on the iPad version and bringing it into the Mac version. Man, the browser on the iPad version is slightly simplistic, but 1,000 times better than the Mac version. If you've never used it, go test out the browser on the iPad version because it is the future of the browser for the Mac version. The writing I've talked about this a number of times, so if you've heard me talk about it, you'll know at least I'm consistent. The iPad version is the future of Logic. It makes no sense to have 2 separate applications. And every single time that Apple has done this, they seem to have the similar playbook. They did this when the iPad came out, and then they started putting their what was really called their iWork suite of apps in both places, and they were very different versions at the beginning. And the versions, I mean, it was almost unusable between the 2 of them. And then with every update, they got closer. And then one day, the version of like Pages and Numbers and Keynote, they got unified. The version that came out was all of a sudden one version. Now the Mac version still has a few features that are unlocked that are different than the iPad version and the phone version, but not that much. The documents open up in either one. There's just a few different things that are the Mac has a little bit more powerful things. But the iPad version has a couple things as well. Things with like the Apple Pencil. Anyway, long story longer. They became unified, and the Mac version lost a number of features when that happened. It lost the whole textbook option and just lost a number of things. And then they slowly added back what made sense, that people maybe complained about the most, and they added some things back in. But they both got them because it was all of a sudden the Mac version was no longer the original Mac version. The Mac version was the iPad version made for a Mac. So now, repeating history a little bit, we are in the phase right this moment where there's an iPad version that's actually quite a bit different than the Mac version. You can share projects, but everything that's in the iPad version is going to either come across into the Mac version. It'll be edited. Maybe some things will be left behind on the iPad version, but there's no future where that doesn't become the full version that becomes the Mac version eventually. It's just inevitable. We're headed on that trajectory. What that involves, we don't know exactly, um, because we're missing a few really big things on the iPad version that maybe would be unlocked on the Mac version if the iPad version was truly took over. Notation editor, but they could be like having somebody work on that in the iPad version right now. Some other things with like flex and some of the markers and things, all of that stuff, that would be easier to add, but I I'm not resisting this. This is not a complaint. I think that if they started the iPad version over from scratch, really getting some of those basics solid with the architecture of the systems, then when it's ready and they move it into the Mac version, it's going to look different. It'll function differently to a certain degree, but hopefully it'll feel familiar enough and hopefully it'll be extremely powerful. Because this version, Logic, on the Mac is old, it's ancient. It's been around for a long time, and I don't know. I would love to talk to somebody who knows the exact history of the code base that this has been all the way from the beginning when it was on Atari. How much of that is still remnants here? Because, geez, this thing's been around for a long time, and some of the bugs that have been around for the longest, the fact that people complain about them and submit bug requests, but they don't get fixed, likely means um, that nobody knows how to fix them, or fixing them breaks something else, or it's just not deemed a big enough priority. I don't know. There's so many things that could explain why they haven't fixed some of the major bugs, ones that keep popping up every once in a while. I don't have a lot of issues with huge bugs in Logic personally. But I find that most of the issues performance wise in Logic on the Mac are caused by third party plugins. And I am not a collector of plugins like some people. Some people collect everything, and then don't maintain their collection, or that they think they need certain plugins that maybe have been discontinued and they're not willing to move on to another alternative, or they don't want to pay for upgrades, or they leave stuff in there that just is sitting and rotting. That causes problems, that causes performance issues. And I recommend to everybody, every once in a while, delete everything and then just reinstall the things you actually use and need to use. And be willing to upgrade the things that are outdated if there's upgrades, even if they're paid upgrades. Like don't install an old version on your Logic Pro and expect it to all function really hunky dory if there's a new version of it. Ugh. Let me catch up on some comments. Mida says, I would pay for a render engine for exporting like in Reaper and to be able to bounce through the master channel. Yeah, the Reaper render engine is something. Um, I wouldn't mind having more control at that level. We've seen this in other workstations. I'm pretty sure like Nuendo and Cubase have a really cool export thing. But you can like do multiples all out. You can be like, I want to do all of my stems. I want to do all of my submixes. I want to do all of my, in Logic, we could say, give me a bounce of all my track stacks or something and have it do it like that. Could be some useful things there. We have over the years gotten a little better export with the bounce. And if we do, let's see, an export as an audio file, this whole thing with all of the elements, I feel like. So a number of years ago, Apple bought Redmatica, which was a sampling company out of Italy, one of my favorite sampling companies. It's what led to, as far as I can tell, It led to the auto sampler that we have in Logic, which is incredible. It led to, I believe, at least the foundational elements of Flex, because they were doing some amazing things with time stretching. That one may have just played a smaller role in that, and maybe they acquired something else too along the way. But I feel like the Flex stuff started coming in right after that company was fully integrated in. I feel like this dialogue here with all the elements and the tracking when you do exporting came from Redmatica as well. But it's funny how it's like one company comes up with all this stuff. Apple's like, you know what? That's gonna be a game changer for us. Let's actually put in the request for the company to buy them, and then they do. I mean, I don't know lately how many things Apple's buying in terms of this. We got Camel Audio a couple years ago. That's where Alchemy came from, and a couple of the other plugins, which are so cool. Those ones are, if you weren't familiar with Camel Audio, we had the multi effects, the step effects, and the fat effects. And they still look like essentially what they looked like. There's some different graphic interface here, but it's very similar to what it looked like in the old days. But like nobody at Apple made that. They bought a company to get it, and they're awesome. But I remember when I heard that Camelot, because they don't like make big announcements. They don't say like, "Hey, we just bought Camel Audio." Usually, you go to the site of the company and they're like, "We're closing down. Make sure you get all your stuff backed up." I never got Redmatica stuff backed up, and it could do so much more in terms of sampling than what Logic can currently do, and that says a lot. There were some things that the Redmatica sampler could do which were just like mind blowing. It was so cool, and I had like a version of it, and I didn't go to their website for like 3 months or something, and I went there and it was closed, and I was just like, oh my gosh. And then they released it in main stage, one part of it first, the auto sampler. They put it in main stage first, not even in Logic, and then eventually on one update into Logic, they just like snuck it in and barely even talked about it. And part of the reason for that, I believe, is because they talk to their attorney team quite a bit when they do stuff like that. But the whole thing with the auto sampler is that you can create new virtual instruments with MIDI control, and it will do all the recording. It'll do all the round robin stuff. It'll do all the velocity layers and looping. It does everything on every note that you want. But if you use this in conjunction with the external instrument, and you can send out the MIDI, you can actually capture any instrument that can be controlled via MIDI. All the analog synthesizers from the beginning of time that can do CV input, all you need is a MIDI to CV converter. And then you can just like pretty much just with a matter of time, have any instrument in here that has some sort of MIDI control capability. And then you have it inside Logic. So I'm sure there's people who are like, well, if we make a big deal out of that, somebody's going to complain that we just made it easy to take all of their sound libraries. So if you have somebody with a Nord or something, and you like all the sounds, with a little bit of figuring out where the velocity layers are, you could just like take all the sounds from a Nord, put it into Logic, and then you get rid of it, right? You could buy a Nord on a 30-day return policy, get all the sounds, and then send it back. I mean, I'm not recommending that, but that's why they kind of like quietly released that feature instead of making a big deal out of it. Let's see. Fraser says, I'm still on 10.4.8 and not once have I been tempted to update. That's cool. I mean, there's nothing nobody needs to update anything. In fact, I update the minute anything comes out so that I can goof around and make videos about it, and you can all decide, hey, this is something I would actually really want to use, or this isn't something I care about. I find though, that Logic, with almost every update of late, has moved forward in areas that I like and use. That's me. That's my take on it. Let's see. Carl says a dramatically upgraded song arrangement tool would be stellar. Yeah, I don't. So right now, song arrangements, we have the arrangement track. I really like the one that's in the Steinberg products, Cubase and Nuendo, where you label each of the parts of the song, and then you have like a arrangement window someplace, and you can tell it what to play and when. That one made more sense to me than just having markers that you have to move around. And part of the reason for that is because what I run into with Logic when I'm doing vocals or something, the vocals often start just ever so slightly before the song section, right? I mean, you're like doing like a little pickup note into something, and if you move them around in Logic, it takes a bit to clean it all up and make sure you're not cutting off phrases. Um, it should, when I'm doing looping, like loop recording of vocals with a section of the song, it should automatically give us like 2 beats or a whole bar before and after to make sure you get everything, and then preserve that amount when you're moving it around. There could be a lot more sophistication with the arrangement markers. I don't know if that's on Apple's radar or not. Um, that's been around for a while now, and they haven't done much work on it, I guess is what I mean. So I'd be surprised if that was something that was coming. Fraser said, let's face it, AI is going to totally take over soon enough. I don't agree. And I agree. I both. It's very complex. Suno certainly has given us a lot to think about. However, let's be clear about Suno for a few minutes. One of them is they're being sued by a lot of people with a lot of money. And we're about to find out if the old guard has the clout or the new guard has the courts on their side, right? Now, they're being sued at this moment. They feel like they're not changing course. They're not backing down. The latest change in all the suits I've been reading about is that the big music labels think that Suno illegally scraped places like YouTube to do their training. That didn't make Suno flinch, and it didn't make YouTube join up with anything, which probably means that Suno paid Google a lot of money to be able to scrape all their videos. And so that'll set the lawsuit back if that's actually the case, because then they'll have to do be more around fair use kind of things about, are they allowed to hear music in the wild and use it to train the AI? I don't know. But that could change. If Suno does lose that, then all of a sudden the legal system is supporting not having as much AI music innovation, and then we're all just back to square one, making our own music. I don't know. There's benefits and benefits and things that aren't so great about both of those. I don't mind innovation, but I don't know. If one of my kids came to me and said, and this is a controversial statement since I teach university level audio production, if one of my kids said, I want to go into the music industry, I would say, ooh, let's talk about AI for a minute. We need to watch this closely, because 10 years from now, they could be writing all of the music for movies, or at least helping. I mean, TV's low-hanging fruit in some ways, commercials for television where people don't have a budget or don't want to spend money on a budget even though they have it for music. I don't know. There's some things with that. Let's see. Boson says better editing of the chord track and chord auto detect would be great. We talked about that a little bit ago, and yes, that's huge. There's a lot of innovation they could do with a chord track, and then pair that with what what instruments would we want? Guitar is an easy one to say. It would be awesome to have a guitar session player, right? I would pay for that. Um, I wouldn't want to, but I would. Meaning, I'd hope they give it to us for free. What other instruments though? If we look at the clues inside of our, let's get rid of those things. Inside of our studio instruments, we have the bass, which is a session player as well. We have the piano, which is a session player. And we have the horns, which came before those other two, but is not a session player, although it has smart controls on the iPad version of things. And we have the strings. Now, these are similar to what we have with the other instruments. So, for instance, with the bass and the piano, maybe more the bass, I would say, we have all the articulations for the bass, slapping and all this stuff, which the session player uses to create the end result that sounds like a really cool bass. Well, we have that with the strings, although we might need we might need more. We also have this with the horns. So any of the horn sections, they have all the different articulations and this. So we could realistically get the string section and the horn section as session players in an upcoming version. All they would need to do, and this is not a small all, this is a big all they would need to do is do all the programming in MIDI so that it has all of the parts. So they would need somebody like a really good musician, really good sequencer, doing all of this stuff to make parts that fit into all of the styles that they want to do. But the rest of the elements are there. So that means we would need a guitar instrument made from scratch, or they would just buy somebody, and then add the guitar. So guitar, I'm assuming strings and horns are coming because we already have half of the equation with those ones. And then an expansion of all the genres so that they all work together. What are we missing in this conversation? There's one big thing that we're missing. Let me catch up on comments. Chord auto detection of your own MIDI that is applied to the chord track, or even audio, Boson. And then Carl says Apple will eventually have to buy or create generative tools to integrate into Logic. Man, I think that the session players are close to generative. Not quite, because they're following like this, just all the MIDI that's put into them, right? I think we have all of that ready to go. Maybe the generative part could be taking all the instruments that it has and the ability to put them in together to a song. So it generates a song form, it generates a chord structure that matches the style you're asking for, and then it does all the parts based on that. Or we even come up with the generative part that instead of being limited to the pre-sequenced session players, that it actually can generate more MIDI to fill in different styles. How cool would that be? So like a MIDI generation based on AI. That would work. And then Carl says one of my favorite comments of the day, that live loops can go. I would love, there's almost 30 of you watching right now. Does anyone use live loops in Logic? And don't worry, I'm going to shame you publicly if you say yes, but it's meant with love. Does anybody use it? Put it in the comments. I really want to know. Probably where I could do like a poll in here or something, but I don't want to. It's like I'm running the whole stream by myself. I don't want to have to like figure out how to do a poll right this second. Although I wonder how easy it is to do. Okay, we'll do this. Live loops. And then yes or no. I'm curious. That way you can do it right there. I just threw up a poll. So far, one person has said yes. So fill out the poll. I'm curious. George says, I use Live Loot so much, and I'd love to see better automation implemented just like in Ableton Live. There we go. If I were performing more live, I might use live loops. But it's one of those things that if I was really going to do that, I might switch over to Ableton for it. So I'll see if anyone else. So far, the poll is not feeding many of your desires to fill it out, but that's okay. And Bozen says, and of course, MIDI effects for audio tracks when applicable. Not every MIDI effect would apply to audio effects, but I would love to have some of them in there. For instance, I wouldn't mind having the modulator in there. I wouldn't mind having some of the ones that can control. So really it'd be a MIDI effect to control the audio effects, just to do different things. It's like, I don't know why they're not doing that. That seems like it would be one of the easier things to do. Taxi says, if I'm using the loops, I'm normally chopping and editing them for a texture purpose. Cool. The amount of yeses are falling in the percentage wise. So I don't know. This is like a badge of honor for me personally, but I think I'm allowed to feel this way. I have yet to make a single video on my channel about the live loops, and that's just me. I don't use them. I'm not interested in them as a workflow. One of these days, maybe if they add some new features to them, I'll finally feel inspired to make a video about them. But I thought that was Apple just trying to say, you know what, let's try to be the one. Let's keep up with everybody else's stuff. Let's be the one that does everything. And then sometimes they're like, screw everybody. We don't want to be like them. We're not going to do ARA. That's like, ugh, why would we do that? So there's sometimes mixed messaging from them just a little bit. Okay, we're back to our list for a moment. This list that I've been reading off of was pulled from everyone's comments on the internet. Everybody who ever commented once, right? Collated by AI to tell us what the most requested features are. We got off on a tangent when we were talking about the browser. Unified browser from iPad version into this. And so what the other half of that are the plugin tiles. So they were saying we also want the plugin tiles from the iPad version to be pulled into the Mac version. I love the tiles on the iPad version of Logic. Love. Those are amazing. And I really feel strongly that it'd be cool to have them. So I think visually they do what the smart tools never really did for me. The smart tools down here, they're okay. EQ. So the smart tools tried to do it, but all these are like 8 knobs. 8 knobs at any time with just a different skin on them. And so they never really are doing what the tiles in the iPad version do, which give us really useful information in addition to some of the more important controls. So I would love to see the smart controls in Logic for Mac be replaced by the tiles from the iPad version. But we're probably going to get the iPad version for everybody soon. One of these days, you're all going to wake up and they're going to say, there's a new update for Logic. And you're going to open it up and you're going to be like, wait a second, this is the iPad version on my Mac. And you'll start figuring out which things that they've deleted from what you can do. The last one of the last things is back to the session players, but more diverse drummer styles. So the drummer's been around a long time, and it has gone through a few different updates. Let's review a couple of those things. So I'm going to add a drummer track. And it's the drummer session player now. But if you look at the styles here, we haven't really added much in terms of the core acoustic drummer styles. We have pop rock, retro, hard rock, punk rock, funk rock, psychedelic rock, right? And then we have some songwriter ones, some brush ones, pop, disco, indie rock, garage rock, modern R&B, neo soul, modern Motown. All those kind of in the same vein. And then we have all the electronic ones that did get added, I believe, after the original set. And then at some point they added these 3 percussion ones. These are like auxiliary percussion, which are really cool. I think they have a lot of power and flexibility. But I mean, think of all the things that are missing from this list, right? There are things missing. And every once in a while, here, let's create this. Every once in a while, I wish we got more of these too. Like, add some more kits to this. We've been dealing with the same overall basic kits for a long time now. And they're not bad. Anybody who says they're bad is delusional. They might have a third-party tool that is better, but that usually just means that they're mixed better up front. And they did in this last version where we got the new 11. They did redo some of the channel strips of these kits, and some of them actually sound better, partially because they added a lot more chroma glow, which is just an amazing processor, and that was all fine. But I wouldn't mind saying, you know what, we've added another. I mean, go to the studio, have somebody working on this for like a couple months. Add, I mean, that's not that much money in terms of the scope of things, but add another 50 kits or 50 of each type of cymbal, or, just like a bunch more. We've been getting a lot of new, let's erase these for a second. Let's do instrument, drum machine designer. This, I think, goes over, or maybe underappreciated, because this is essentially the same thing as the acoustic kits, or can be. It's just a bunch of empty slots where you can put in full instruments, right? And so it's nice to be able to be like, they haven't added a lot more kit stuff, but they have been adding a lot more drum machine designer stuff in a lot of their updates. That's where we get, various things from. Let's see, if we wanted to do library, that's where like a lot of these sound packs are adding things into those. So we have the producer packs and then some of the additional sound packs. Those will come with new percussion stuff all the time. It's hard sometimes to sift through it to know. That's where some of the sound browser from the iPad version would be so nice in here, because it gives you visuals to help identify where things are. It lets you quickly surf through those and sift through them with filters that we don't have here. And so I think it would be nice to see some of those things popping out in a little bit easier way to do. Okay. But the engine the engine of the session player for the drummer is good. I wouldn't mind getting more patterns for each of them. It's like we have 8 patterns for this one particular pattern for that, and then 5 for the other one. I know we can do our own now, but it's still feels fairly limited overall. Let's see. Catching up. And then Boson says MacBook will apparently get touch support next year. Maybe the iPad OS and Mac OS versions will merge. There's a lot of rumors around that for sure. There will be some sort of iPad OS laptop at some point, is the guess. Eddie says, is there a good iPad drum app like GGD, BFD, etc.? Techno for baby audio looks nice, but not iPad compatible yet. And then overall, if they don't add features, I would like quality of life additions. Yeah, all of that I'm in alignment with what you're saying, Eddie. When maybe we should wrap up this stream by talking about when is an update coming. we don't know. They keep this really tight-lipped. I have to wait a couple more years to tell the story of I was on the Logic Pro beta team for 24 hours one time. Not my fault. They were super nice. But they're super tight-lipped. And that's good, I think. I've talked about, it's good and bad. I personally love being surprised with things. I really do. I hate knowing that there's a surprise coming and I don't know exactly when or what. So it's like the worst of both worlds. But Apple loves, the Christmas holiday aesthetic. For any of you who celebrate Christmas, when you're a kid and you know it's coming, it's like you can barely sleep. And you wake up and your body is hit with all these like chemical endorphins or whatever, because it's just like you can't handle all of the excitement around it. And so you open it up and it's like it leaves this imprint on you. And I think Apple loves imprinting emotional joy on the people. So according to them, because there's a downside, which is if you release an update and everyone thinks it's going to fix something like ARA or give us a new browser, and then it doesn't, nothing is more memorable to a kid than a Christmas where they got nothing that they wanted. And so, man, it's like you gotta have to hit a home run every time you go up to plate. And that's not the case with Logic of late, right? It's not the case. We haven't, this browser we've known has been horrible for decades. And they're like, you get used to it. That's kind of how I feel about it. I'm used to it at this point. It's not great. It's meh. And yet I make it work. And so does everybody who uses Logic. What a pain to audition sounds. If you're going to give us 600 different drum type things and we have to load them into the track to hear them, that is a effing waste of time. Like, what? Oh, and we find workarounds. If you load a Drum Machine Designer, select one of the empty slots, and then click on something on the side, it will play it for you. So it's like I have to have a Drum Machine Designer loaded up to audition things so I don't have to like load them onto a full track. Oof. 301 says, would love to have a global to set everything to minus 14, minus 18, minus 20 levels. That would make sense in the mastering plugin if they were expand the mastering assistant to do more. It could be done there pretty easily, but that comes at a price. I mean, they would have to actually design it smartly. Mark says, I'm assuming what they meant is, I want good sounding jazz drum session player. Oh man. I have very complex, and people hate me sometimes for my complex feelings about jazz. But I took a group of students on my study abroad that I do every summer to the Czech Republic, and we went to one of I think it's the longest running jazz club in the world in Prague. Um, I mean, everybody's played there who's ever played jazz and is famous. Their wall of celebrity guests is just goes around the whole thing. It's incredible. And I sit there, and after a certain point, it's probably so I'll be honest, it's probably a reflection of myself. Not spending the time to become more nuanced in my understanding of jazz. Although I was in a jazz band and when I was young, and I've listened to a lot of jazz and studied jazz forms. I took a jazz improv class at the university. It's like I've put in some dues with jazz, but it's like going into a museum and studying something that is a dead art form. Now, there are a lot of you who are going to be like, no, there's a lot of like great jazz musicians and performers. Denver, where I live, has great jazz clubs, and I know a few people on this channel who've watched are performers, but it is not like I can't get my kids to listen to jazz. They have zero interest. It's not like one of those musical forms right now that is like thriving in the same way that opera is not thriving. And so when people say they want Jazz and Logic as one of these session players, I can't figure out what you would do with it, really. So maybe those who keep on asking for it, maybe you should tell me in the comments, what are you going to do with the jazz session player in Logic? I would love to know. That's a really off the beaten path comment section, but. And then Bozen says, trying to preview sounds in the browser while playing the project is something I'll never get used to, though. It's a mess. It's a total mess. Yeah, there's got to be a better way. If all they fixed was the browser, and not just fixed, but not just made like the iPad version either. Give us something really revolutionary. I bet you if they gave us a revolutionary browser, people would actually know all of the other things they've added over these years in terms of the library. They've added so much. We would actually recognize what they've added and use it more efficiently, and it would feel like we have all of these new sounds. It would actually make it feel like we have a ton more things than we do. Integrate in the Apple loops and integrate in all the sounds of the instrument presets. And like a good browser would make it feel like we have so much content that we didn't even know about, yet it was the stuff that was already there. So Wyatt, the reason we're talking about this right now in terms of this is because we are due for an update, and based on all of the trajectory of how Apple does this, we are very close to getting probably a small one right this moment, but it could be bigger if it goes a little longer. And conjecture is one thing, but I would say one of the things I have built my entire channel on and done since the beginning of when I was, well, not the beginning, but there was a period of time where I was on YouTube making like just random videos. And then I noticed a trend that my channel would grow if I would make update videos about Logic, because not everybody does that. It's a pretty niche thing. But when there's a Logic update, a lot of people look for videos. And so I went from like 400 subscribers to where I'm almost now at 25,000, almost all because I talk about the updates of Logic. So I have a mass database of when all of the updates have come out, what was in each of those updates, and so it's like we know when Apple releases the new OS now for iPad and for Mac, that an update for Logic is either immediately before it comes out or pretty close. It follows it pretty closely. In this case, Apple is slowly updating all of the icons for their apps and then doing small updates with them because of the new glass aesthetic. And Logic still has the old icon. And the only way to get the new icon is by doing an update. And so it's guaranteed to be coming shortly, if for no other reason than just to fit into the aesthetic of the operating system. But we're due for like some small things, potentially bigger things. The one thing we do know is that not everything it's not the same day every year. It's not the same. I mean, we often go months and months and months without. But with a new operating system, there are bound to be things that they're figuring out don't work quite right or that are an issue. And so we should get either just some bug fixes with some small features, or we could skip to 11.3. It's been known to happen. Depends on what they add into this. But right now, the discussion is more, what would you want it to be in it? You know what I mean? So it's like, what are we looking for when we do this update? And the full list of this was just pulled by searching online and having AI collate a list of what the number one requests are. Mostly, I'm guessing, by people on Reddit. And potentially some through YouTube video transcripts and things, but it was a good list. So if you joined partway through or more than partway through, you can always go back. We talked about, I think so far, 4 or 5 things that are the number one user requested features and improvements. The analog summing mixer is one that a lot of people ask for, and that other workstations have. The chord track and session instrument enhancements, unified browser and plugin tiles, and then more diverse drummer styles. All of those in conjunction with, of course, probably the number one thing I hear from everybody, which is to make it so ARA works in the universal version. Let's see. Mark says, good point. Why jazz? Basically, it would be nice to have a decent sounding jazz drum sound to use to layer real acoustic improvisations over just a simple groove in various swing bebop styles. So for now, of course, you always have the option of going through the loops, which do have some jazz drums. So you could use audio loops for something very similar to that. Why is that not clicking? Oh, that's because I'm on Tony. Okay. So there are ways around it in a way. Not great. Not always great. I'm going to be honest. But we do sometimes. I'm trying to see if I can just easily pull one up. Maybe a search would be better. So there are like the 22 bebop with bebop fills as an example. Again, it's not the drummer track, but there are ways to kind of mimic some of that stuff. It makes sense. I appreciate you saying what you said, Mark. Boson says, it's pretty fun to browse all the Alchemy samples from your macOS library folder in the browser. A lot of cool stuff in there you can use in Quick Sampler. I agree. See, a good browser would help funnel all that stuff so it would actually work. And we would have a lot of what appears to be more than what we currently have. So I think one of the issues that we face with Logic is there's too much. Or not too much. There's a lot. But even like this, so I'm going to like just load up a beat here. It's like, I don't know what that is. Okay. But you can drag that out onto here, or you can drag it over and put it straight into the quick sampler, optimized, drum machine designer, sample alchemy, sampler, zone per note, or you can do it out here and convert it into a sampled instrument. I mean, there's a lot of techniques to help us revitalize stuff that's in here. Then we can use the beat breaker to change something around. But what we're missing is like this central nervous system to help us tie all of this stuff together. And we're missing that right now, so we don't have it. And then people are thinking that we just don't have a lot of stuff in here, when in reality, the the loop browser by itself has over 34,000 items. And each one of those can be mangled, reprogrammed, repurposed, reused, revitalized using all of the other tools. We're never going to be on a shortage of this. I mean, there's no way in your lifetime you're going to use 34,000 items in the loop browser. And some of them sound bad, but can be changed and made to sound really interesting using these other tools that we have. Chimera says, I'd love Logic to have a sidechain envelope plugin like the LFO tool. And yeah, well, we do. But just for MIDI for instrument tracks. I would like to see it expand across all of them. Reason, I use the sidechain tool in Reason a lot in Logic. It is there's two things that I use the Reason rack for all the time. Anybody who is looking for a way to spend some money, get the Reason rack. It has two things which are amazing. One of them is the stereo tool. And this thing is the best stereo spread I've ever used. It maintains mono compatibility phase relationships while making it sound wide as heck. And then the other one is the sidechain tool, which, it really just has the right features. When they made this last year, it was incredible. I wish we had something like that in Logic that worked just like it. But those, I mean, I have it. I have a Reason rack, so I have them, but just not through Apple. And Boson says, use the beat breaker. And beat breaker, I've made at least one or two videos on the beat breaker. I love that thing. I mean, that thing is really cool. Compositorium says they need to fix the piano roll visualization for orchestral and wrong spellings of accidentals and chord track for score editor ASAP. This is not pro. I mean, the score editor is so ancient. They have over the years made updates to the score editor, but I don't know if you all noticed when the Logic for iPad version came out, it didn't even have the score editor. And so I'm guessing that they think it's not one of the most important features and that people are going to keep on using other third-party notation software options. I don't know. It's a really in-depth score editor, but I've had issues with all of those things. The accidentals are tricky. I know there's a way to work with them, but it's not easy. Chimera says you can use Beat Breaker, but you can't do custom envelope shapes. You're right. I love this group. You guys are the best. And I think we're fading a little bit in terms of time. But what a good discussion. Hour and 14 minutes. Let's wrap up by talking about maybe one of the most controversial things, that is, if Logic Pro for iPad were to become the Logic Pro for Mac version, how many of you think it would become subscription model? By the way, the live loops poll that I did earlier, 73% of 15 people said that they use live loops. So it's definitely in use by some of you. I don't know. How many of you would leave Logic behind if it became subscription only? 301 says, another feature I would like to see, taking a snapshot of a mix session, then able to copy and paste that snapshot in another session as a floating window. Interesting. I had never thought of that as something I would want, but that's cool. Would any of you leave Logic if it was forced to be subscription model? Let that be the thought, I guess, we end on. I know we got a good group right now. And thanks for watching. We are not doing any streams tomorrow at all. But we are going to do maybe one more stream this week on Friday with my album project stuff that I do. And then if, and this is a big if, today's Wednesday, we've been known to get updates on Wednesdays or Thursdays, rarely Fridays, but 2 weeks ago we got a Final Cut Pro update on a Friday, which I thought was highly unusual. So we're on update watch today, tomorrow, and then next week. But my guess, and I'll put this on the record, is that by the time the third week rolls around, something will have been released. That's my guess, based on all the evidence. Let's pull the plug. Thanks everybody for watching. Catch you on the next one.